Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns and welcome once again to another edition of Sound Off Louisiana. And I think it is safe to say that this whole Jared Rickey potential reappointment to this Louisiana State Police Commission, as most of you know now, that didn't transpire, and Governor Landry will announce the appointment of Mr. Guidry, Stephen L. Guidry Jr., probably sooner rather than later, but of course with everything going on in New Orleans, I'm sure that may be protracted a little bit, but at any rate, he is the choice. And I can just tell you that emotions ran very high, as evidenced by Dr. Kimbrough's correspondence to me, which I want to say this, you know, as everyone knows, I put the feature out there praising Dr. Kimbrough for having the guts to have laid the truth bare, and I want to praise him once again. He sent me an email thanking me so much for putting what he had to say out there, and that's what Sound Off Louisiana does. If you have something to sound off on, and he certainly did, he said university presidents are, quote, just being used as cover, unquote, and that to appoint anyone aside from who the governor informs them needs to be on that list, because that's who the governor's going to choose, would be, in his words, quote, political suicide, unquote. Well, as I said, emotions ran pretty high in all of this, and we have another gentleman who wants to sound off, and I'm going to do that. That would be the Louisiana State Police Commission Executive Director, Jason Hannaman. He was not pleased with my most recent feature, and he had commentary to make, and he sent it to me. We are going to read his email, and I will interject a few things along the way, just as I did with Dr. Kimbrough. We are going to provide his email in its entirety, and we will embed his entire email into this feature. So let me begin. Now this email was received on Friday. Let's see if I can get the time. It was received on Friday, January the 3rd at 10:32 a.m. All right, Friday, January the 3rd at 10:32 a.m. And here's how the email goes. And again, I will occasionally interject. Good morning, Mr. Burns. I am reading through the final draft of the eulogy. Now, let me stop right there. What he's referencing when he says the final draft of the eulogy, his wife apparently had a death in the immediate family. And I want to make this point perfectly clear, because I can just see anybody out there saying, well, Robert Burns, you have to be about the most cold-hearted person on earth to be bantering back with him during a time like this. I was never made aware that this was the situation until the day prior to this. And I certainly would have improvised to anything, but I will point out that people don't die and then the eulogy is the next day. That's never been the way I've seen it, and it obviously, it looks, the evidence is pretty strong that had taken place, even as I got the email saying, look, we're not required to give you anything that prospectively going forward. You have to ask for it again. We will only give it to you once we've gotten it. But I wanted to interject into that first sentence, because I don't want people out there saying, well, you must be the most cold-hearted person imaginable. And anybody who knows me knows that's not the case, but I don't want that perception out there. And I will make that in the written commentary as well, because if I were out there and I saw this, I'd say, well, maybe we don't know who you are. It's not who I am, and I want to make it perfectly clear. I was not made aware of this situation until the day before, not during previous discussions or previous correspondence. So, good morning, Mr. Burns. I am reading through, and by the way, Jason is apparently drafting the eulogy for his wife's relative. So, good morning, Mr. Burns, and I'm certainly want to express condolences, and you know, I've been through the loss of my father, the loss of my mother. I don't have any siblings, but I know that's a stressful period, and I'm certainly cognizant of that. So, good morning, Mr. Burns. I am reading through the final draft of the eulogy. I have prepared for today's services. However, I would be remiss if I didn't pause to provide a brief clarification since I am so prominently featured in your most recent post. In my nominations letters to colleges and university presidents for an expiring term, I always indicate whether or not the current member is interested in being nominated once again. The letter to each president attempts to succinctly introduce or reintroduce, he puts the RE in other words, if it's somebody new, to introduce or reintroduce them to the process. Answer the reasonable questions of who is serving in that capacity now, highlight the requirement that 3 nominees be submitted to the governor for consideration, and provide a deadline that ensures timely receipt with the parameters outlined in the Louisiana Constitution. Next paragraph. Early in my role as executive director, I recall conversations with Dan Sullivan of the Louisiana Civil Service League regarding obtaining nominations. He noted that some college and university presidents simply did not want to be bothered with nominations to the State Civil Service Commission or State Police Commission, but that it was part of their job as outlined in the Louisiana Constitution. He also noted that looking at the alumni database and filtering by zip code was a simple start in finding a qualified nominee to represent the college or university. This is another paragraph. Contrary to how I have been portrayed in your article, I have no horse in this race or any nomination. I have only ever attempted to ensure the nomination process for vacancies and expiring terms, as well as the employee election process, is followed to the letter of the law in each and every instance, which, as you have reported, was not always the case. That is the end of the email. And of course, we now know that this whole thing is a sham. The university president is not going to seek out a qualified alumni. We now know, thanks to Dr. Kimbrough, what we've all suspected for a long time, that the governor tells you who you're going to put in that letter, and you can throw in 2 other names just for fluff purposes if you'd like, even though the Constitution actually says that the university president shall place 3 names in. I have a public records request in to get all of the correspondence that has been taking place with these universities going back to January 1 of 2016. We're going to see how many times there are other names in there or whatever the case. But I'm just going to say this. There's an indication here that I portrayed Mr. Hannaman in this role. What I did is what any responsible journalist would do, in my opinion, and I quoted someone, and I quoted that individual verbatim, and I feel fairly certain that Mr. Hannaman knows exactly whom I'm referencing when I say a retired lieutenant. I stated that others shared those sentiments. Every bit of that is true, okay? Now, I had said that because with a blog you are allowed to place your own thoughts in it. I said I thought maybe it would be better to just say the incumbent, Jerry Rickey, has expressed desire to be reappointed and let it go at that. The retired lieutenant took it a step further. He said that if Jared Rickey or anyone else has an interest in being reappointed, let them reach out to the university president and do their own lobbying. Because this individual feels very strongly that to have put the kind of commentary that was in that letter, i.e. his unique business knowledge and skill, basically made him uniquely qualified now, and that he had been in regular attendance. The source who made the quote that I placed in the feature has posed another very good question. Would Mr. Hannaman have placed other truthful revelations about Mr. Rickey in his correspondence to the president? In other words, by the way, Mr. President or Madam President, it may also benefit you to know that Mr. Rickey, on behalf of his company, signed a guilty plea and paid a $2 million fine for having dumped raw sewage into the waterways around St. Tammany Parish. All you have to do is go to episode 9 of the Counterclock podcast. You'll see all of the documentation. I've given the link for it previously. I'm sure that Mr. Hannaman has never listened to that podcast. She's never listened to St. Tammany Parish, Parish President at the time, Kevin Davis, saying what a mess we had. And what he said in there is that our residents were frustrated that swimming places had to be closed, rivers and such. And he said we didn't need fecal monitoring instruments to gauge the waste that was being dumped into these waters. He said you could smell it. He said people's homes were backing up with it. And he said you could see it, okay? This is not me. This is Parish President Kevin Davis. So that is a unique business skill. I'll also point out that Mr. Davis, then Parish President Davis, made the decision that the only way they were going to be able to get to the bottom and get this mess cleaned up is if they acquired Mr. Ricky's company. They initially offered $39 million for the company. Mr. Ricky is, according to all of the correspondence and emails and such that Miss Delia provided, and she did one more fantastic job. As I've said, it's one of the most fantastic pieces of investigative journalism I've ever seen. Mr. Ricky said that this is outrageous, that they aren't even being serious, and that he really didn't even want to counter because $39 million was such a lowball offer, but that he would consider $54 million. All I can tell you is they wound up buying it later, obviously. They wound up buying the company for $36 million. So Mr. Ricky's business skills, if you will, in that particular round of negotiations cost him $3 million. And let me point out, in addition to the $2.1 million fine that was levied against Mr. Ricky's company, and he signed the document confessing to or pleading guilty on behalf of the company, that's his signature on there, okay? In addition to the $2.1 million fine, he had already done $12 million in remedial work. Now, does that not tell you that we got a lot of sewage being dumped here? $12 million, and committed to another $832,000. I guess Mr. Hannaman could have also mentioned in there that, oh, by the way, he has been on reality television bragging of making a $50,000 bet on race cars that are completely violating law and putting people's lives in danger, if you ask me, in going 100 plus, and 100 is highly conservative. They broke the record for going from New York from the East Coast to the West Coast. And Ricky is on the video as saying that he did not believe it could be done, and he bet $50,000, and he did lose the bet. But there's license plates being changed out, all of which is illegal, and nobody disputes that it is. There could have been some other commentary placed in there, and I think that the retired lieutenant's point is well taken. You only want to put in the glowing aspect and leave the president in the dark on some of the problematic deals with Mr. Ricky. What I'm hoping, because in all fairness to Mr. Hannaman, I've never had any problem over there getting a public record. And I will be perfectly honest, I did not like it when I got wording that said you're going to have to show us a statute that says that we have to give you something that going forward that we didn't have at the time you asked. As I said, if you ran a private business that way, because this is a product, okay, that we're paying for, the doors would be shut. And I stick by my statement that the doors need to be shut on the State Police Commission. I believe it is dysfunctional and that it essentially serves no purpose. Now let me just say one last thing, and then I'm going to wrap this up. I have no doubt that Mr. Hannaman, in his wording to me, got it from an attorney, either Eula Simeon or Lenore Feeney. And it's consistent with some other obstructionist activities. And when I say that, I mean Belinda Parker Brown and all of her other plaintiffs sued the State Police Commission over that whole Colin Sims, the intervention into that campaign. And by the way, the two people that orchestrated that, I noticed they're not here anymore. Jason Hannaman, I assume he was told to do this, but he declined to accept service on behalf of all of those individual members of the commission. Now, the sheriff did not read carefully because the instructions on service said they will all be at a meeting and you can serve them all at that meeting, gave the exact date and time of the meeting. Instead, the sheriff just chose to show up and present them to Mr. Hannaman as a representative of Mr. Hannaman. His handwritten notation declined by Mr. Hannaman. And, you know, an open question on that litigation is whether or not Lenore Feeney was consulted about sending that letter out in the first place. I think the evidence is overwhelming that she was not, because, okay, Jason Hannaman declined service. The strategy is that we're going to do a peremptory exception of no cause of action. Well, gee, we can't do that if they're not served. Let's waive service. So does that not tell you that either the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing? Okay? Because that was fairly defiant. No, we are not going to accept service. Those notations by that sheriff on there, pretty emphatic. Jason Hannaman said he was not going to accept service. Lenore Feeney subsequently says, okay, we'll waive service so that we can have a peremptory exception of no cause of action. Most of you will know that they lost in that effort and the litigation remains alive. But the other reason that I would suggest that Lenore Feeney was never consulted is she's placing in pleadings that you have no authority to do this, meaning Jared Rickey and Eula Simeon. And by the way, in a discovery response that Ms. Parker Brown has been gracious enough to provide to me, the question was asked, who initiated this? Who initiated sending out that letter? And it turns out they responded, and it said, Chairman Eula Simeon. Now you notice he's not there anymore. Now it's up to you if you want to believe his official explanation of why he has resigned from the State Police Commission. I can just tell you the people that I have spoken with, and I've spoken with quite a few, they do not believe him, okay? And Jeff Landry does strike me, unlike John Bell Edwards, who was unwilling to do see that little bit of motion kicked the light back on, so I apologize if you were in the dark for a little bit. John Bell Edwards was not willing to hold a hearing to remove Calvin Braxton, even though the LSTA was demanding, you better hold a hearing to remove Calvin Braxton. I have no doubt that if, this is a hypothetical, if Jeff Landry wanted Eula Simeon off of that commission, and he said, look, I need you to resign, because a governor cannot remove someone without doing a hearing. And if Eula Simeon, this is all hypothetical, said, I'm not going to resign, I have no doubt that Governor Jeff Landry would say, that is fine, we will conduct a hearing to have you removed. And remember, it's the governor who makes the decision. The governor presides over the hearing, and the governor makes the decision. And there's also a knowledge that I film all of these, and quite frankly, I believe that would have presented if this is a hypothetical, would have presented a golden opportunity for Jeff Landry to have grandstanded in the removal of Eula Simeon. Now, that is all a hypothetical scenario, but I think that whole intervention into that Colin Sims campaign, particularly with that letter going out with Jeff Landry's name on prominent display, caused a lot of problems and will continue to cause problems. But now there is only 2 members of that commission that are still on it that sent that letter out. Those being Monty Montalago and, is he the only one? I don't know. I'm drawing a blank. He may be it. It's too early in the morning, I guess. But maybe there's only one. I don't know. I'd have to sit and think on this. I'll put it into written commentary. But at any rate, we have presented Mr. Hannaman's sentiments, and I've added my commentary. If Mr. Hannaman would like to address this at the Thursday meeting coming up, I welcome him to do so. I will videotape everything he has to say and I will put it out. Anybody else that wants to chime in about either your euphoria or any kind of thing you want to assess as having taken place with regard to this now known, not going to happen, Jared Rickey reappointment, feel free. So, because that's why this blog was formed. I want to thank everyone for your dedication. I hope your new year has gotten off to a great start, and we look forward to bringing you another Sound Off Louisiana feature in the very near future. Thank you once again.